The desperate call. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Union headquarters gleamed against the purple sky of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 suns that hung in perfect harmony above the capital world. Within the grand assembly chamber, representatives from 47 species sat in carefully arranged tiers, each section designed to accommodate the unique physiological needs of the Union's diverse membership. Ambassador Zephyr Kortak of the Altarian Republic stood at the central podium, his tall ethereal form casting shifting patterns of light through his translucent skin. The gravity of the situation showed in the dimming of his natural luminescence, a sure sign of distress among his people. Honored delegates, Kortak began, his melodic voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic design. We face an unprecedented crisis. The Kepler mining colonies have fallen silent. Our last transmission from Colony 7 came 47 standard hours ago. He paused, allowing the holographic display behind him to materialize, showing the distant star system that housed some of the Union's most productive resource extraction operations. The Obsidian Horde has breached our outer defensive perimeter. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The Obsidian Horde was legendary among the peaceful species of the Union, a nomadic fleet of aggressive raiders who consumed resources and left devastation in their wake. For over a century they had remained in the furthest reaches of unexplored space, more myth than reality. General Vex Thorn, the Union's defense commander, stepped forward. His robust bear-like form represented the Urson Collective, one of the few naturally aggressive species in the Union. Even among his warrior people, Thorn was considered formidable, his thick fur marked with scars from countless battles defending Union space. The situation is dire, Thorn rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. Our reconnaissance drones have confirmed the presence of at least 200 Horde vessels. They move in coordinated swarms, overwhelming defensive positions through sheer numbers and savage tactics our forces aren't equipped to counter. In the observation gallery reserved for non-voting members, Dr. Niven Cross adjusted his position, uncomfortably. As Earth's sole representative to the Union, though more of a scientific observer than a true diplomat, he was one of only 3 humans to have ever left Sol system. His presence here was the result of an unprecedented exchange program, allowing the Union to study a Deathworld species under controlled conditions. Cross had spent the last 2 years cataloging the differences between human psychology and that of the Union species. Where humans saw challenges to overcome, most Union species saw obstacles to avoid. Where humans planned for conflict, the Union preferred negotiation and peaceful resolution. It made for fascinating research, but also left Cross feeling perpetually isolated. General Thorn, spoke Counselor Liss of the Aquatic Dominion, her gill slits fluttering with anxiety. What forces can we deploy to counter this threat? Thorn's expression darkened. Our 7th Fleet is the closest, comprising 60 vessels of various classes. However, initial engagement reports suggest the Horde employs tactics our commanders find difficult to predict or counter. The holographic display shifted to show recordings from the first skirmish. Union ships moved in, precise formations, executing textbook maneuvers that had served them well in conflicts with pirates and minor disputes. The Obsidian Horde vessels, by contrast, seemed to operate without any discernible pattern. They attacked from impossible angles, ignored conventional tactical wisdom, and fought with a ferocity that shocked the Union forces. They fight like animals, whispered Delegate Prism of the Silicon Consciousness, the geometric patterns of his crystalline form flickering with distress. There's no logic to their assault patterns. Dr. Cross found himself leaning forward, studying the tactical displays with growing interest. To the Union observers, the Horde's tactics appeared chaotic and savage, but Cross saw something else. Improvisation, adaptability, and a willingness to take calculated risks that his own species would recognize instantly. Ambassador Kortak raised his hand for silence. We have convened this emergency session to authorize the deployment of our full defensive fleet. The combined forces of the Union represent the most advanced military technology in known space. Surely, with respect, Ambassador, interrupted General Thorn, I've run the tactical simulations, Even with our full fleet, casualty projections exceed 60%. The Horde's unpredictability makes conventional strategy ineffective. The chamber erupted in worried chatter. Species that had enjoyed peace for generations suddenly faced the prospect of total war. Some delegates called for negotiation attempts, others suggested retreating to more defensible positions. The cacophony of fear filled the ancient hall. Above, the noise, a single voice cut through the din. There is another option. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to the speaker. Ancient Counselor Vega of the First Compact stood slowly, her arthropod form clicking softly as she moved. At over 3 centuries old, she was among the oldest beings in the Union, and her knowledge of history was unparalleled. Protocol Omega, she said simply. General Thorne's eyes widened. Counselor, you cannot be serious. Protocol Omega has never been activated. The risks are less than the certainty of defeat we currently face. Vega interrupted, her multiple eyes focusing on different sections of the chamber simultaneously. The protocol was established for exactly this scenario, when the Union faces an existential threat beyond our conventional capabilities. Dr. Cross felt a chill run down his spine. In his years of research, he had occasionally encountered references to Protocol Omega in classified documents, but the details were always redacted. The few hints he'd gathered suggested it involved contact with quarantined species. Ambassador Kortak's luminescence had dimmed to barely perceptible levels. For those unfamiliar with the historical context, Protocol Omega authorizes contact with species classified as developmentally dangerous, but potentially useful in extreme circumstances. The holographic display shifted again, showing a familiar blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. Cross's breath caught in his throat as he recognized his homeworld. Earth, Kortak continued, designated as Terrasol 3 in our records, home to a species known as humans, classified as a Deathworld survival variant with aggressive tendencies and unconventional problem-solving capabilities. Delegate Prism's crystalline form pulsed with alarm colors. The savages from the Terror. World, this is madness, is it? Vega asked calmly. Our observers have monitored their development for over 2 centuries. They have survived on a world that would kill most of our species within hours. They have developed technology specifically designed for warfare, and their entire cultural development has been shaped by constant conflict. Dr. Cross stood up suddenly, drawing startled looks from the delegates. If I may, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the vast chamber. I've spent 2 years studying human psychology and culture. What you call savage aggression, we call adaptive thinking. What appears chaotic to you might be perfectly logical to us. General Thorne turned to study the human scientist. Dr. Cross, your insights have been valuable in understanding your species' behavioral patterns. But this would be asking your people to engage in interstellar warfare against an enemy they've never encountered. Cross smiled grimly. General, with respect, my people have been preparing for exactly this scenario since we first looked up at the stars. We've been imagining alien invasions, interstellar wars, and impossible odds for generations. It's practically our cultural obsession. The chamber remained silent as delegates processed this information. Finally, Ambassador Kortak spoke. The protocol requires unanimous consent from the Security Council. This decision cannot be made lightly. The Kepler colonies have millions of civilians. General Thorne added grimly. If we're going to act, it must be soon. Over the next several hours, the debate raged. Some delegates feared that contacting Earth would invite more problems than it solved. Others worried about the precedent of involving a quarantined species in Union affairs. But as reports continued to arrive from the outer rim, entire systems going dark, refugee ships fleeing before the advancing horde, the arguments for action grew stronger. Dr. Cross found himself at the center of the discussions, answering detailed questions about human military capabilities, cultural attitudes toward conflict, and the likelihood that Earth would even respond to such a request. Would they help us? Asked Counselor Liss. Why would a species we've kept isolated agree to fight our battles? Cross considered the question carefully. Because, he said finally, If there's one thing humans can't resist, it's the chance to be heroes. Present this as a rescue mission. Innocent. People threatened by overwhelming odds, and you'll have volunteers lining up. As the third sun began to set over Centauri Prime, the final vote was cast. Protocol Omega was activated for the first time in the Union's history. Within hours, a carefully crafted message was transmitted toward Sol System, carried by the fastest courier ship in the Union fleet. Dr. Cross had helped compose the communication, ensuring it would appeal to human sensibilities while accurately representing the threat. On Earth, the message was received by the Terran Defense Corps monitoring station in Earth orbit. Captain Rex Holloway, the duty officer, stared at the decoded transmission with disbelief before immediately forwarding it to Terra Command. Unknown Alien Alliance requests military assistance against hostile invasion force, he summarized to his superior. They're offering technological exchanges and formal, diplomatic recognition. The response from Earth was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, the TDC had authorized the deployment of Task Force Alpha, 12 of Earth's most advanced warships, carrying humanity's finest military personnel. As the Earth fleet prepared for their first journey beyond Sol System, neither the humans nor their new alien allies fully understood what they were unleashing. The Obsidian Horde had never faced an enemy that fought like humans. The war that had been manageable was about to become something entirely different. When Deathworlders go to war, the transition from hyperspace always left the Union observers queasy, but when the human fleet materialized at the edge of Kepler system, it wasn't the spatial distortion that made Ambassador Cortax's luminescence flicker with unease. It was the ships themselves. Where Union vessels were elegant curves of polished metal and energy fields, the human warships looked like they had been forged in the heart of a dying star. Angular, aggressive, and bristling with weapon systems, they moved through space with a predatory grace that made even General Thorne's warrior instincts prickle with unease. "By the three suns," whispered Dr. Lyrics, the Union's chief military analyst, her tentacles writhing in distress as she studied the tactical displays aboard the command vessel Harmony's Light. Their ships looked like weapons themselves. The lead human vessel, designated UES Retribution, established communications almost immediately. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Commander Jade Phoenix, a woman whose steel gray eyes seemed to take in everything at once. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe military style, and her uniform bore insignia that Dr. Cross quietly explained indicated extensive combat experience. "This is Commander Phoenix of the Terran Defense Corps Task Force Alpha," she announced, her voice carrying an authority that made several Union delegates unconsciously straighten. "We've reviewed your tactical data and are prepared to engage hostile forces. What's the current situation?" General Thorne activated his own communication link. "Commander Phoenix, this is General Thorne of Union Defense. The Obsidian Horde has established a blockade around Kepler Prime. Our forces have been unable to break through their perimeter. They have approximately 200 vessels arranged in overlapping kill zones with mobile reserve groups." Phoenix interrupted, studying her own displays. "Classic swarm tactics. They're counting on overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority." She smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression that made the Union officers deeply uncomfortable. They haven't fought humans before. Within the human fleet, Lieutenant Marcus Stone stood in the briefing room of the assault carrier Leviathan, addressing his Marine battalion. Stone was built like a fortress, broad shoulders, scarred hands, and eyes that had seen too much combat. Around him, 300 of Earth's finest warriors listened with the focused attention of apex predators preparing for a hunt. "Intel suggests the Horde uses boarding tactics to capture enemy vessels," Stone explained, gesturing to holographic displays showing Obsidian ship configurations. "They're physically stronger than most Union species but lack our endurance and tactical flexibility. When they board Union ships, they expect compliance or panic." A young Marine raised her hand. "Sir, what if they try to board our ships?" Stone's grin was savage. "Then we give them a proper Earth welcome, Corporal Martinez. These aliens have been bullying peaceful species for generations. Time they learned what happens when you pick a fight with predators. The briefing continued with detailed tactical planning. But aboard the Union command ship, Ambassador Kortak was growing increasingly concerned about the humans' approach to warfare. Their communication channels buzzed with terms like acceptable, casualties, collateral damage, and shock and awe, concepts that made the diplomatic corps deeply uncomfortable. Dr. Cross, Kortak said privately, "Your people seem enthusiastic about the prospect of combat." Cross nodded grimly. "Ambassador, you have to understand, humans have been fighting for survival since we first stood upright. War isn't something we fear, it's something we understand. For us, this isn't just a military operation, it's a chance to prove ourselves to the galaxy." The first engagement began at 14:30 Galactic Standard Time. The Obsidian Horde, detecting the arrival of new vessels, dispatched 50 ships to investigate, a standard probe that had worked effectively against Union forces for decades. What they encountered was unlike anything in their experience. The human ships didn't arrange themselves in defensive formations. Instead, they scattered across a wide front, each vessel operating independently while maintaining constant communication. When the Horde ships approached, expecting the usual cautious maneuvering of Union tactics, the humans did something unprecedented. They charged. Commander Phoenix's voice cut through the tactical channel. "All ships, execute pattern Chaos 7. Remember, they're expecting us to fight like the Union. Let's disappoint them." The Retribution led the assault, its forward guns opening fire at maximum range while executing a spiraling attack pattern that brought it dangerously close to enemy vessels. Behind it, the destroyer Vengeance and the cruiser Defiant split off, in opposite directions, forcing the Horde ships to divide their attention. On the Union command ship, General Thorne watched in fascination and horror as the human ships engaged in what appeared to be controlled chaos. "They're breaking every rule of space combat," he muttered to his tactical staff. "Those maneuvers should be impossible." "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "the human ships are taking incredible risks. They're operating within minimal safety margins." But the risks were calculated. Each human captain was a veteran of the Martian conflicts, the Titan campaign, or the brutal fighting in the asteroid belt. They had learned warfare in the unforgiving environment of Sol system, where a single mistake meant death in the vacuum of space. The Obsidian Horde found themselves facing an enemy that anticipated their moves, countered their tactics, and fought with a ferocity that matched their own. When Horde vessels attempted their standard ramming attacks, the human ships didn't retreat. They met them head-on with reinforced prows designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. Lieutenant Stone's Marines got their chance for action when 3 Horde vessels attempted to board the Leviathan. The aliens that came through the breached airlocks expected to face panicked civilians or lightly armed security forces. Instead, they met humans in full combat armor, fighting in the close-quarters environment where humanity excelled. The battle for the Leviathan's cargo bay lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the surviving Horde troops were in full retreat, leaving behind their dead and wounded. They had never encountered a species that fought with such coordinated brutality. "Target their propulsion systems," Phoenix ordered as her fleet continued to tear through the Horde's probe force. "We want prisoners and intelligence, not just wreckage." This was another concept that stunned the Union observers. Where their own forces sought to minimize casualties and damage, the humans actively planned for capture and interrogation. They thought like warriors, not just defenders. Within 2 hours, the Horde's probe force was eliminated. 30 ships destroyed, 20 disabled and captured. The human fleet had taken moderate damage but no losses, a result that defied every tactical simulation the Union had run. The main Horde fleet responded predictably, sending their full force against what they assumed was a small lucky enemy. What they found waiting for them was 12 human warships that had used the intervening time to study their tactics, analyze their weaknesses, and prepare a reception that would haunt Horde nightmares for generations. The Battle of Kepler Prime began at dawn on the planet's surface. As the local star cast long shadows across the mining installations the Horde had been systematically destroying. In space above, 200 alien vessels faced off against 12 human ships in what should have been a massacre. Commander Phoenix stood on her bridge studying the tactical display with the calm focus of a chess master. Around her, her crew worked with the efficiency of a machine designed for war. On the communication channels, the voices of her fellow captains carried the same deadly calm. "Phoenix to all ships," she announced. "They outnumber us 17-1. They have superior technology. They know this system better than we do." She paused, her smile visible to every human in the fleet. "I almost feel sorry for them." The humans didn't wait for the Horde to attack. Instead, they struck first, using a tactic that would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. While the main fleet engaged the enemy's attention with a frontal assault, 2 human ships used the planet's gravity well to slingshot around Kepler Prime, emerging behind the Horde formation at impossible velocity. The psychological impact was devastating. The Obsidian Horde had built their reputation on being the aggressors, the ones who brought fear and chaos to their enemies. Suddenly, they were the ones being hunted by an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. "Their command ship," Phoenix noted, studying the enemy formation. "It's staying in the center, protected by their heaviest units. Traditional defensive thinking." She opened a channel to Lieutenant Stone aboard the Leviathan. "Marcus, how do you feel about a boarding action?" Stone's reply was immediate and enthusiastic. "Just point us in the right direction, Commander." What followed was perhaps the most audacious military maneuver in recorded galactic history. The Leviathan, designed for close assault operations, accelerated directly toward the heart of the Horde formation. Its escort ships laid down covering fire while the assault carrier's armor absorbed tremendous punishment. When the Leviathan reached the Horde command ship, it didn't attempt a conventional docking. Instead, it rammed directly through the larger vessel's hull, its reinforced bow tearing open massive sections of the enemy ship. Stone and his Marines poured through the breach like an avenging tide. The Horde crew, faced with armored humans fighting in zero gravity with weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat, broke and ran. Within an hour, the command ship was in human hands, its surviving crew in custody. The psychological effect on the remaining Horde fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Seeing their command vessel captured by the enemy they had come to destroy, many ships began to retreat. Others fought with increasing desperation, making tactical errors that the human fleet exploited ruthlessly. By the time Kepler Prime's sun reached its zenith, the battle was over. The Obsidian Horde, for the first time in their recorded history, was in full retreat. Nearly half their fleet was destroyed or captured, and the survivors carried with them stories of an enemy that fought like demons and thought like predators. Aboard the Union command ship, Ambassador Kortak stood in stunned silence, watching the tactical displays show the impossible, a complete human victory against overwhelming odds. Around him, delegates from dozens of species tried to process what they had witnessed. "How?" whispered Counselor Liss. "How did they achieve this?" Dr. Cross, exhausted from hours of translating and explaining human tactics, looked up from his notes. "Because," he said simply, "you asked the wrong species to save you from a war. You didn't just call for help. You invited apex predators to a hunt." General Thorne approached Cross with something resembling awe in his expression. "Your people fight like nothing we've ever encountered. The Horde has terrorized the Outer Rim for decades, and you defeated them in a single engagement." "General," Cross replied, "humans have a saying. If you want peace, prepare for war. We've been preparing for war since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Today, the galaxy found out." In the aftermath of the battle, as rescue ships moved to aid the surviving Kepler colonies and human medical teams worked alongside Union personnel to treat the wounded, a new reality began to settle over the galaxy. Earth was no longer a quarantined world of dangerous primitives. They were the species that had done what the entire Galactic Union could not. They had stopped the Obsidian Horde. Commander Phoenix stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at the stars of a galaxy that would never see humanity the same way again. Behind her, Ambassador Kortak approached hesitantly. Commander, he began, his luminescence pulsing with uncertainty. The Union owes your species a debt that can never be repaid, but I must ask, what does Earth want in return? Phoenix turned, her steel-gray eyes reflecting the starlight. Recognition, she said simply. A seat at the table, and the knowledge that when the next threat comes, and there will be a next threat, the galaxy won't have to face it alone. As the combined fleet prepared for the journey back to Union space, carrying with them captured Horde technology and the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, one truth had become clear to every species in the known galaxy. The war had been manageable until humanity's fleet was called in. Now everything had changed.